Okay, good morning, folks. We're gonna go ahead and get started here. Technically it's 10:29, but I think we'll be okay. And for everybody online, thanks for joining us as well. My name's Savannah Cheaton. I'm with Environmental Science Associates. We've got Mike Tietze with us, who's our general manager, and John and Andy, also from ESA, who are part of our platform team. I'm going to cover a couple of housekeeping things, and then I'm going to hand it off to Mike to get into some of the general information about ETS GSA. Okay. Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody who's joining us. Thanks for being here. Real quick, restrooms are here on the left if you need them. There's coffee here on the right. Feel free to help yourselves. For questions, if you're online for the webinar, there's a Q&A section. So go ahead and leave questions in the chat or in the Q&A portion, and we will answer them when we get to the Q&A portion of our agenda later today. And then in-person folks, if you can please hold your questions. We've got 3 short presentations, and then we'll have time to have questions before we get into the activity in person here. And then just so everybody knows, this is going to be recorded. We do have copies of the slides if you want to take those home after this, but this will also all be posted on the Turlock Groundwater website. So awesome. And with that, here's what we're going to try to stick to time-wise. We might even be ahead of schedule already, which is awesome. But Mike is going to provide a overview and update of ETS GSA. Then I'm going to give you an overview of our rules and regs development to date. And then John is going to go over the platform and onboarding to the platform. And then we're going to have that Q&A session. Then for folks online, that's when we're going to actually end the webinar after Q&A. And then we're going to go ahead and proceed with our in-person landowner workshop activity. So if you brought your pins and your laptops, we'll go ahead and help you get set up on the platform right now. And then if you don't have your pin or something's going on, feel free to come talk to us and we can help you figure that out.
You have extra laptops too.
Yeah, great. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Mike, to...
All right, so my name is Mike Tietze. I'm General Manager, East Turlock Subbasin GSA. So this is important today because it's an important initial step to managing our groundwater. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about that. So, I want to thank you all for coming. There are a couple of folks here, a couple of additional folks that I want to identify that can, if you have questions or you want to talk to them further about this program. Sarah Wolf, General Manager with East Side Water District. And Matt, do you mind if I introduce you? So, and Matt Beeman, who is on our Technical Advisory Committee, he's an alternate on our board, and he's with Merced Irrigation District. And then do we have any others there? I need to put my glasses. I don't recognize any other faces from our tech or our board. So, Sarah, did you want to give any opening remarks?
No, I think we can just.
Okay.
I mean, I can chime in if there's anything.
All right. So, and if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. For starters, let me just say a couple of logistical items. So this is the rollout of our groundwater accounting platform. And the initial rollout is not a live rollout per se. So there's no fees associated with this initial rollout. We just want to get it out there early so people can start seeing how it works, start logging into their water accounts, and
Oh, sorry, the slides are just jumping.
oh, they're jumping by themselves.
Well, I think the mouse jiggles. So
Oh, all right. Okay. All right. Anyways, so I wanted to make you all aware of that in case you weren't. You should have received a PIN, personal identification number, for all of your water accounts. If you did not, ask John over there and he will get you set up. I mean, it's not our intention to exclude anyone today, so we'll just, talk to you about your parcels or who you represent so that we can get you access. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Sigma and why we're here. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed in 2014, and it required a number of different things that got us to this point. First, we were to form groundwater sustainability agencies in all basins that are identified as either medium or high priority by the Department of Water Resources. And the Turlock subbasin, of which we're in the eastern part, is a high priority subbasin. Then those groundwater sustainability agencies were responsible for managing the groundwater in compliance with the Act. So sustainable groundwater management. In order to do that, they were required to put together a groundwater sustainability plan that meets all the requirements of the Act and that spells out exactly how we're going to achieve that. So we'll talk a little bit further about that. Our plan was initially submitted in 2022. And then in January, we were informed that the Department of Water Resources considered our plan incomplete. And they asked us to provide them with information to address two deficiencies that they identified. And so we're in the process of doing that, and our revised plan is going to be adopted on July 11th. And it is available at this point for you to look at. There's 4 different chapters that we've changed. It's available for you to look at on the Turlock Groundwater website. If you have questions about how to get there, let us know, and we can provide you that information. Then we're responsible for implementing the GSPs, and we actually started on that. It's a very sensitive mouse. And we need to get to sustainability over a 20-year period. So we've actually crossed the starting line, and we've started monitoring and building our compliance infrastructure and how we're going to do this. And then in 2042, we're required to achieve certain metrics, and then we've set interim milestones along the way. And so the definition of sustainable yield, I'm not going to read it for you, but it's essentially the maximum amount of water that you can withdraw from the groundwater basin sustainably over a period of time, right? We know that with varying weather, groundwater levels are going to go up and down, but over the long period, we need to make sure that we're not overdrafting. And that's why we have this definition of sustainability, that we manage it in a way that doesn't lead to what's called an undesirable result. Now, whoever came up with this language, I can't vouch for, but the undesirable results are declining groundwater levels. So groundwater levels can't keep going down. Reduction of groundwater storage. In other words, we need to manage groundwater like as a reservoir, so that when surface water is not available, we can rely on groundwater. In our case, we have very little surface water available, but we still need to manage that reservoir. Seawater intrusion is not an issue for us. Water quality degradation can happen as a result of groundwater extraction. We haven't identified that as a significant problem in our area. Land subsidence, when you withdraw groundwater and you depressurize clays, like toward the center of the valley, we have what's called the Corcoran clay, which separates the upper groundwater system from the lower groundwater system. If you depressurize those clays, they can compress under the weight of the overlying soil. And we actually are seeing a little bit of subsidence in a couple of areas, but not enough to cause any damage at this point. But we've had up to about 2 to 4 inches, and that's been verified by various different means. And then surface water depletions, we are bounded by rivers that are connected to groundwater. And when we take groundwater out of the aquifer, we change that balance between the surface water and the groundwater. And we don't want to overdo that, because then we're taking water from the beneficial uses in the river and that are managed by Merced Irrigation District and Turlock Irrigation District. So this is an overview of the Turlock subbasin. We have one groundwater sustainability plan that's developed for the entire subbasin, and 2 groundwater sustainability agencies. So we are East Turlock Groundwater Sustainability Agency, And we, our partner in the West Turlock Groundwater Sustainability Agency includes several cities and Turlock Irrigation District, and then county lands as well. So just an overview of ETS GSA. We are a joint powers authority. So in the lower right, you'll see different colored shading. The blue is East Side Water District. Then toward the southwest, we have Belico Cortez Water District. We have a small area that's served by Merced Irrigation District. East Side Water District and Belico Cortez Water District actually don't deliver surface water, but they do act on their growers' behalf to try to get replenishment water in and other recharge projects. And then we have lands that are Merced County and Stanislaus County on the north and south there in orange and yellow. We have over 90,000 acres of high value ag land, but 95,000 acres of irrigated parcels, and of that nearly 90,000 acres is actually in fields or orchards that are irrigated, mostly in permanent crops, about 3/4 in nuts and vines. Little surface water available. We do have some, which is significant for us. We're trying to get more, but we have limited access to those surface water supplies. So, do I click here? No. How do I get rid of this bottom thing here? Well, we'll just pretend we can read the whole thing. So because we have little surface water available, actually, I don't know what that last point is, so it must not be important. So here's kind of a snapshot of the conditions that really bring us to today. So on the left, you have a well hydrograph of a representative well in our subbasin. And what you can see is that the blue line trends down to the right. Here's 2024. Back over there is 1990. And so you can see that long-term, the groundwater levels have been declining. The green line across the top is our measurable objective. That's where we want to be in 2042, or we want to be around there. The orange line or red line in the middle is our minimum threshold. That's the line where we define that if we have too many wells below that minimum threshold, we have an undesirable result, undesirable condition where adverse things could happen to wells or by way of subsidence or to surface water. And then in recognition of the fact that we're currently trending down, it's going to take us a while to turn it around. We have a dashed blue line at the bottom that's our interim milestone. And so we're allowed to set that below the minimum threshold for a period of time before we turn it back around. And that's one of the things we're looking more closely at in our GSP update. So you can see that in 2027, that's when we're supposed to hit that interim milestone, but not below. And then we're supposed to trend back up so that we get up to the green line. So you can see that what the situation is. And if we do nothing, it'll just keep going down day by day until we run out. This on the lower right, you see these concentric circles. These are contours of groundwater levels. And what you can see is what's called a cone of depression, kind of in the western part and western and central part of our GSA. And so over a long period of time, because our aquifers are very productive but don't get much recharge, there's water that's been taken out of storage there. So that's what we're trying to address. We have estimated that we need to decrease our net groundwater demand by about 96,000 acre feet per year. That is a preliminary number. I usually tell folks the only thing that we know for sure about that number is that it's wrong, but it's the best number that we currently have. And it gives you an idea of what the size of the problem is. So we need to reduce net demand by an estimated roughly 40%. That's a lot. Now, not all of that is going to come from cutting back groundwater pumping. Some of that is going to come from practices or recharge projects or practices that give us more recharge. So there's different ways to achieve that, but it's a big ask, and we need to arrest groundwater decline by 2027 and then get up to the green line by 2042. So I just want to give you a sense for, sort of the size and the seriousness of that situation. If we fail to do that, then Sigma requires the state to step in, find us deficient, and then they will take over, write a plan, charge us money for the pleasure of doing so, require everyone to register their wells. You've probably heard what's going on in Tule right now and in some other sub-basins. And yeah, I won't belabor that. So the way that we achieve this is through projects and management actions. And then, we need to operate on a daily basis. So projects are physically constructed water delivery and recharge projects. So that might be, additional water delivery infrastructure, for example, or recharge basins, those sorts of things. Management actions are programs that incentivize site-specific practices or projects, or that result in management or decrease of groundwater demand. And then operations is just the administration and the compliance. So here's what's on the agenda right now. We have, and this is in draft form on the Turlock Groundwater site, we have a demand reduction framework or demand reduction plan. Part of that is our groundwater use regulation and fee program. We plan to we have a plan for it that we're going to adopt on July 11th. The program will be fully adopted by January 31st, and it'll include groundwater use allocation by parcel and regulation, a groundwater use fee, the groundwater accounting platform that we're talking about today will help us to implement those things. And then in order to govern how we move forward, we've got groundwater use management rules and regulations that we're working through adopting right now. We have several growers in the room that we have as part of a committee that are working with us to help to develop those step by step. And if anybody here is interested in learning more about that or participating or just listening in, let us know, because we want an open and transparent process. The groundwater demand reduction program, so this is what actually moves the needle. We have recharge projects. We are implementing a multi-benefit land repurposing program under a nearly $9 million grant that we've gotten from the Department of Conservation. And we have a land retirement program that we're wanting to start implementing. So those two things will be incentivized programs that will be paid for by the fees. And what we intend to do is to, I think I've got a slide on that later. And then it'll be managed under an adaptive management approach. That basically means we're going to do monitoring to see what the result is that we get in the groundwater and to adjust our program going forward. Can we have somebody set up an additional set of chairs for these folks so they don't have to stand? Sorry, thank you, appreciate it. So we'll make program adjustments as needed. So this is a slide that shows, just in quick form, that shows our demand reduction framework and our proposed fee framework. And it'll phase in reductions in groundwater extraction. So what you see here is the baseline use. So that's on average what we're currently using. And this is all measured by evapotranspiration data from satellites. So it's a little bit different from what you actually pump, but it's a good measure of how much groundwater is being used and whether or not we're reducing by enough. So this is the baseline. Then these lines here are 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% reduction. Here's the estimated sustainable yield. These are years from 2025 through 2042. So we plan to go down in steps, first 10%, then 20%, and then if we need to, 30% and 40%. This yellow line is how we're projecting that our projects and management actions are actually going to result in decreases. So if they're implemented as we're planning, and we would provide like a per acre per year incentive to growers to implement these programs, then we should see a reduction that roughly follows that one. And the incentives will make it easier for folks to do what would, be otherwise be a more painful process. The fees that you see in the top, there would be a base fee tier that goes up to the estimated sustainable yield. This hasn't been adopted yet. We're in the process of adopting it now. So just as an aside, if you're interested in learning more about it, you're interested in providing input, the Turlock Groundwater site will have information, and we'll be discussing it in our technical advisory meetings and in our board meetings, which you're welcome to attend and provide input. You're also welcome to call me or call others if you want to talk about some of these things one-on-one. We want input as we implement this. So the baseline fee tier would be up to the estimated sustainable yield. We would have a transitional fee tier that takes you up to the red line that has an additional surcharge. And then if you pump more than that, we would have a penalty fee tier that's at a higher cost. So, so $1 sign under the baseline fee, transitional tier would have $2 signs, and penalty tier would have $3 signs. That doesn't equate to zeros behind the number, but just, like compared to when you do like a restaurant review on Yelp. Yeah, there we go. So what's our objective? We want to, taking a step back, we want to maintain local control. We don't want the state to step in, but we also want to maintain the local ag economy. If you have this much land repurposing without planning for it and doing it in a deliberate fashion, what you have on your hands is a disaster. And so what we want to do is we want to integrate grower-led changes into a working landscape. So we want to maintain the ag economy and the working landscape, and we want you to be able to choose from a menu of options that we would work with you that suit your particular business and operation. And if you have particular business objectives, we want to have options available that allow you to at least get some relief from implementing what you're planning already. So for example, if you're planning to take some orchard out of production, then we want to be able to give you an incentive for doing that. So we have this multi-benefit land repurposing strategy. Multi-benefit just means that some of these things can provide flood control, environmental benefits, other benefits that you might be able to get help for implementing, and that make the overall result more palatable than just taking a lot of land out of production. We want to adopt sound financing strategies and incentive programs. We want to preserve high-value ag land, and we want to promote those grower-implemented solutions as opposed to something that's dictated from the top down. I mean, this is bad enough as it is. So what we want to do as much as possible is allow growers to select their own options for achieving these results. So key takeaways: we have an overdraft situation. I don't think there hasn't been a lot of debate about that. But I mean, clearly we have falling groundwater levels and we can't sustain that forever. Managing groundwater use and tracking it through what we're talking about today is one part of that strategy. So we're going to focus on that tool today so that we can see how you can see how we're planning to monitor groundwater consumption. And there will be other workshops later this summer that will talk about how that ties into our fee program. So there's a process that we have to go through, a public process for the fee program that you'll learn more about. And so this is just the first step in implementing that strategy. And it's early days, and we're going to continue to adjust and to learn together. And we really want to take, as an agency, a posture of understanding what your concerns are. We We'll address those concerns to the extent that we can. We won't be able to address all of them, just being honest with you. But what we want to do for sure is not make any stupid mistakes. So are there any questions?
Yeah. We're gonna save questions.
We're gonna save questions. Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Right, okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, I'm gonna jump us into our next presentation just to provide a quick overview of the rules and regs development process. My role in this has been to facilitate the rules and regs policy development with our rules and regs ad hoc committee. All right, so just real quick, I want to cover what our goals are for groundwater accounting through the rest of 2024. The first priority is to get growers access to their ET data and to help everybody get familiar with the accounting process and methods that we've developed so far. We're also going to continue to develop the groundwater accounting platform as a tool and as a resource for growers in the GSA. And then the third priority is to provide an outline of what's needed to appeal ET estimates with meter data for the 2025 reporting period. All right, so to date, we've developed a rules and regs ad hoc committee. It's made up of growers, GSA staff, our platform development team, and then we do get support from technical experts when we get into some of the technical parts of policy development. And to date, up until our last meeting yesterday, rules and regs have really been focused on developing the methodologies for estimating consumed groundwater from ET data that we get from Land IQ. So I'm going to cover what we've recommended so far to the board and to the TAC as policies that are related to the actual accounting mechanisms. And I did just want to bring this up. So we have this tension when we're developing policies where we have to think about, how detailed are we going to get from a scientific standpoint? We've got a really complicated system that we're simplifying into these accounting practices. So we want to make sure that we're scientifically accurate and we're doing a good job there and that our methods are defensible. But they also have to then be easy to understand and to communicate to folks. And we have to consider the amount of resources that it takes to implement some of these programs. So these things are in tension because the more complicated we make an accounting method, the more flexibility we provide to growers, the more resources it takes for the GSA in terms of staff time and accounting methods and development work that has to be done in order to be able to actually implement those things. So we're trying to strike this balance between these three things at all times. And so it's great to have this committee to bounce ideas around and talk about what we need to do here. So just reiterating, similar to the demand management strategy that Mike was talking about and basically all of the actions that the GSA is taking, this is a really iterative process for rules and regs development. We're going to continue to refine things the more data and feedback we get from growers and the more that the GSA grows and matures and has more capacity to do things. Also, what we're doing for rules and regs development does directly feed into what happens in the groundwater accounting platform. So as we develop new policies, they'll be reflected in the platform. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm just going to go through some of the accounting basics that we've talked about in our rules and regs ad hoc committee and that have been recommended to the board to be adopted as policy. The first is that the parcel is our base unit of accounting. So you'll see this in the platform that we roll everything up to the parcel level in order to do billing. We do have the option to look at field level data as well, but the parcel is really the base unit for the actual accounting that we're doing. We decided on a reporting period that's November 1st through October 30th of each year. So the 2025 reporting period is actually going to start on November 1st, 2024 this year, and then we'll carry through to October 30th of 2025. The next kind of big terminology piece is a water account. So a water account is a group of parcels that have pooled supply and usage. And so what you got on your water account pins was our first initial grouping of water accounts by parcel landowner, and that's from the county tax assessor's information. We recognize that Merced County's a little bit behind on getting that parcel data set updated. So if there's an error or something, please feel free to come talk to us. We can help you work through that process to make sure all of the parcels that you're managing are in your account. All right, the next big thing here that John will also cover in the platform is that total ET and total precipitation for a parcel are calculated as the sum of the fields associated with the parcel. So I think my cursor will show up. Okay, great. So what we get from Land IQ is ET and precipitation data for each field throughout the subbasin. So those are the green shapes and polygons that you see on the screen. And each of those fields is associated with only one parcel, which is the blue area. So in this case, what we would say is the total ET for the whole parcel, right, is really just the sum of the ET from these fields. So we're really only looking at how much you're ETing from actual ag lands, right? We're not looking at the parcel as a whole when we're looking at doing the math to figure out how much you've used. And then this is kind of the big one here on applied versus consumed water. So what we're talking about with ET is consumed water. When we do applied water is what you can measure with a meter, right? So we get precip, which falls naturally from the ground, and then you're going to be applying either surface water or groundwater or a combo, right? And then what we're measuring when we're looking at consumed water is the amount of water that's actually used by the crop. It's the water that leaves the system. And we know that plants and delivery systems are not 100% efficient. So we would expect that you apply water, whether it's precip, surface water, and groundwater, and then what's consumed is going to be lower than that. Okay, so there's some fraction of the applied water that's going to go back into our system. So it's either runoff or it's percolation back to the aquifer. And so what we're trying to actually capture with consumptive use in ET is just the amount that's actually leaving the system. Okay, so with that, that gets us to sort of our first main equation for how we actually use ET to get an estimate of how much groundwater is actually consumed and is leaving the system. So we start by saying, you know, what are all the applied water sources, right? So we have ET from applied water, we have ET from applied surface water, and then we have ET from precipitation, and that actually shortens to effective precipitation. It's just what we call it. The other two don't have short fun names, unfortunately. But this is our equation. So we know that total ET is made up of these three elements. And so if we go ahead and rearrange this equation to solve for consumed groundwater, which is our blue metric, ET from applied groundwater, it looks like this. So what you'll see in the platform and what you'll hear us talking about all day until we're blue in the face is that our estimate for how much groundwater you've consumed is going to be total ET minus effective precip, so the amount of ET from precipitation, and then minus any ET from applied surface water. And so that's how we take ET and we back it down into what your consumption is. And this consumed groundwater amount would be the amount that would be used to determine any usage fees going forward. Okay, so what's currently in the platform that John's going to be able to show you and that when you log in today, you'll be able to see for the parcels in your account. First, we've got policies and accounting rules for ET and effective precip that have been drafted and reviewed by the TAC and board. So you'll be able to see the total ET, which I described earlier, is the sum of the fields associated with a parcel. And the same thing for effective precipitation. So we've developed a methodology for taking total precip, and then a fraction of that is effective precipitation and is subtracted from your total ET. We are still working on policies for surface water reporting and accounting rules. So if you are somebody who has surface water, just know that that's not currently being credited towards your account at this point, but it's something that we're continuing to work on over the summer. And then this is a big one. So if your farm or your parcel is only irrigating with groundwater, like you don't receive any surface water supplies at all, just groundwater, then this ET minus effective precipitation is the estimate for you for consumed groundwater, right? So in this equation, if ET from applied surface water is just 0 because you don't have surface water, then when you're in the platform, you have ET minus precip, and that is your estimate for consumed groundwater. So if you're not a surface water provider. What's in the platform now is your estimate for consumed. All right, and then a lot of questions around pumping data and having meter data to be able to compare to ET. This is great. We encourage you, if you have a meter, to track your information and then report it back to us. It helps us refine some of the rules and regs development. But for this reporting period, so for the 2025 reporting period, groundwater use is going to be calculated based on ET data provided by Land IQ. So that's going to be your estimate for consumed groundwater. But we are planning to have a appeals process. So this is if you have meter reading data for the entirety of the 2025 reporting period, we will have a way for you to report that to us. And if there's a significant difference between the ET estimate of consumed groundwater and the ET estimate, and the estimate of consumed groundwater from your pumping data, then that can go through an appeals process. And if the pumping data is lower, the GSA will have a policy to correct that. Oops, sorry. All right, and then we have developed preliminary guidelines for groundwater well meters. We've got some copies up front that we'll leave out for folks to take with you. But the Rules and Regs Committee, with feedback from growers, did put together some preliminary guidelines on what you're going to need to support an appeals process, or just in general, sort of best practices for maintaining meters and collecting the data that's going to be necessary to support an appeal, or just to be able to make a really good quality comparison between ET data and the meters that you have on your property. All right, so that's all I've got from a rules and regs front. And I'm going to hand it off to John to go ahead and run through the platform now. And here, you can escape out of the PowerPoint.
Okay. All right, thanks, Savannah. Okay, all right. Hi, everybody. I'm John Burns with Environmental Science Associates. I lead the team who's built this groundwater accounting platform, groundwateraccounting.org. And we're going to walk you through how the platform is configured for the East Turlock Subbasin GSA. So curious, the GSA sent out postcards to folks, to landowners with a pin. Could I just get a show of hands on folks who have received your pins in the mail? More than half, maybe. And how many of those folks brought their pins today? Okay, we're doing pretty good. Has anybody used their PIN yet to log into the platform and enter it? All right, nobody's done that yet. Okay, well, we're going to walk through that today. For folks who don't have your PINs, after we get through the presentation, we will be able to look up the PINs for you if you could provide some basis for us to determine, to show that that's a parcel, an APN that you should have access to. So folks are welcome to follow along with this on your tablet or laptop. We'll also provide some hands-on support after the presentation for folks who want to stick around and work through your sign-up process. So you'll start by visiting groundwateraccounting.org/ETSGSA, which is the homepage for the East Turlock Subbasin GSA in the platform. And the first thing you'll need to do is create your user profile, where you'll enter your email address and set a password. Oops, I misclicked there. So in order to do that, you can click the create user account. You'll enter your email address and you'll need to verify that email address. This send verification code is going to send a number to your email address that you'll then type in, and that will confirm that your email address is active. You can then proceed to enter your username and password. I'm not going to walk through that part of the process today, but again, we can walk through that with you afterwards for folks who want to get their user profile set up. Once your profile is set up, you will be able to log into the platform, and I'm going to log in with a landowner account that I've created. Enter the right password. It is Savannah's saved password. Okay, and then once you're logged in with your user profile, as you can see, it'll say your name up in the top right corner there. You'll then be able to claim your water accounts using those PINs. So we'll get to this page. Folks will have received one PIN for each combination of owner name and address that's on record with the tax assessor. For some folks, that could involve entering a lot of PINs for different variations of owner names, trusts, et cetera. We'll be able to consolidate if you receive many PINs into fewer water accounts to the extent that you want to pool the water from those different parcels. So I've got a couple of example PINs that I'm going to enter here. For this demonstration, the PINs I'm entering are the Turlock Airport owned by the city of Turlock. I'm using those for the demonstration because that's a publicly owned parcel that we can use for a recorded meeting. I wanted to note that the data that you will be entering for your own parcels that you either own or are authorized to access will be private to you, protected by your username and password. You're welcome to share your PINs with other authorized users, but be aware that when you do share the PIN, that gives the person who you've shared with the ability to control the pooling of that water account. So you'll want to make sure you're only sharing that with folks who are part of your authorized farming operation. I can, yeah. So the GSA policies, are these draft or adopted policies? Actually, draft policies for pooling of water mean that the supply that would be allocated in the tiers that Mike described would not be limited to the parcel to which those tiers of water are allocated. You would be able to bring together any number of parcels that you operate as a single operation and have that available supply for all of those parcels that could be used across all of those parcels. When usage is measured on a particular parcel, it would be pooled together so that you can essentially irrigate more on one field and less on another and stay within those lower usage tiers. Is that adequate? Okay. So that's what we mean by pooling. I'll show you what that's going to look like in the platform in just a moment here. So you can see that I've entered 2 PINs. Each of those PINs had a single parcel associated with it. Some of the PINs could have 2 or 10 or any number of parcels. Once you've entered your PINs, seen your account numbers and your parcels, we'll click continue. I'll have an opportunity to just view on a map to say, did I get the right PINs? Does it look like the right parcels? There can be out-of-date information in the tax assessor's record. If for some reason there's a parcel here that you're not authorized, you're not currently operating, or you're not currently the landowner, you can select no. In the majority of cases, the PINs you'll enter, you'll get to yes. If you do have to answer no to any of these questions, you can contact the GSA to sort out what needs to change with the particular parcels associated with that PIN. So once I've entered yes for each of those, I'm then directed to my water account overview page. Here I'll note we're rolling this platform out to other GSAs throughout the Central Valley. Currently, we have rollout plans in place in the neighboring Merced subbasin for 2 of the GSAs there. So for folks who are operating in multiple GSAs that are participating in the platform, you'll be able to see your lands across those GSAs from this page. You'll follow a similar process. For any folks who are in the Merced Subbasin GSA, we're doing a similar workshop to this tomorrow morning over at the Merced Farm Bureau. Be fun to see if any of you donate your time twice for folks who are operating in 2 GSAs. You'll see a similar work through, but the policies obviously in different GSAs will vary. So the difference would be in the policies. The platform functionality would be the same. I mentioned that because if you come to this page and you have entered PINs from another GSA, you would see all of those GSAs in this one view. So here are the parcels and fields for the Turlock Airport that we entered. In this case, this is a single farming operation. And so I don't want 2 separate water accounts for these parcels. I want to merge these parcels together because I'm operating them together and I want to pool the usage and supply. Typically, growers and landowners are going to want to pool to the maximum extent possible. It's going to be more flexibility, but that's a choice you can make based on the operations of your own farm or lands that you own. To pool or move the parcels from account to account, I can click that Request Water Account Changes button. Here I see a view of the 2 water accounts for the 2 PINs that I entered with the parcels. I'll note for folks who are sort of operating as a consultant representing multiple landowners that operate independently, you in that case would likely not want to pool all of your parcels together if you're in that case where you're representing multiple different independent landowners. For the case where I'm a single owner or operator and I want to just bring all of my parcels into one account, I can simply click this consolidate button. And that will move all of the parcels into one account. For folks who have a more complicated situation, you can drag and drop the parcels to arrange them as you see fit with different parcels in different accounts. If there's any parcels that for whatever reason you are not the owner or the authorized representative of, you can remove those from your water accounts. If there's any parcels that are missing, you'll need to currently contact the GSA to get access to those parcels, and they'll walk you through adding those parcels into the record. So I'm going to simply consolidate and then click submit request. Here we have some language describing the legal disclaimer, essentially saying that you are in fact authorized to pool the water from these parcels and that you won't hold the GSA liable for any pooling that you're choosing to authorize here. So I'll submit that request, and then I'm directed back to my water account overview page where now you can see I have a single water account with both parcels in it. Making sure I'm hitting all of my notes here. Okay, so next we'll click through to the detail page for a parcel. I can click here or view water account. This is kind of the main page that landowners and growers are going to be using to view and understand your water accounts in the East Turlock Subbasin GSA. You'll be able to select the reporting period. Data will be preserved historically. Currently, we're in the beginning of the very first trial reporting period. So that's November 2023 through October of 2024. We provide the data in both a depth view and a volume view. The depth view, acre feet per acre, or simply feet of water that's applied. I know that's how we like to think about the water that we're applying to the fields. Behind the scenes, we're accounting for the water volumetrically. So I can toggle here and look at the total acre feet or volume that are being accounted for. You'll notice when I toggle here, it changes all of the numbers that you'll see on the page from that depth view to the volume view. The account overview shows that we have a single water account made up of two parcels. There's 316 acres of parcel area and 152 acres that are in irrigated fields. As Savannah described, the ET is being measured from the 156 field acres. Allocations of supply would be to the 316 parcel acres. Again, the parcels are the blue boundaries. The fields as delineated by the Land IQ team are the green boundaries. And here we see for the 2024 reporting period, that's data is current, I should note, through the end of April. We haven't yet brought the May data into the platform. I expect that to be coming in soon, and then additional months of data will be entered as it's available. So through April, we're seeing 0.88 feet, about just slightly over 3/4 of a foot of ET, and a similar amount of effective precipitation. And in that ET minus effective precipitation, close to 0.03 acre feet. As Savannah described, if there's no surface water being delivered to these parcels, if this is being irrigated from groundwater only, this is the GSA's estimate of your consumed groundwater. So I scroll down the page, there's a chart where we'll be able to see on a monthly basis what that ET minus effective precip looks like. As we bring surface water into the platform, we'll relabel this to your consumed groundwater chart. But for the time being, we're not calling it that because we have a bucket to account for the surface water, as you'll see, but we haven't yet started bringing the surface water data in. So that's a little nuance I wanted folks to be aware of, that we're just being explicit that this is the ET minus effective precip. Again, if you have no surface water, this would be equivalent to your consumed groundwater. But if you have surface water in addition to groundwater, then we would need to bring the surface water data in. The chart doesn't look very useful right now, and I was a little bit chagrined to have to present this today, but we haven't yet started as of April, the irrigation season, so it's just kind of noise in the data. This chart becomes more meaningful and useful as irrigation is actually occurring later in the season. And then there's a month-by-month view, a non-cumulative view. When we hope to get to come back and speak to you all again in the fall as we're rolling this out for the actual rollout when we have the full 2024 irrigation season to look at. As I scroll down the page, here we have the water measurements. This is kind of getting more into the details of the specific measurements that are happening on the water account and on the parcel. So we can see the actual land IQ ET on a month-by-month basis and the total value, the actual precipitation that Land IQ is measuring, and then that effective precipitation, which is the portion of the precipitation that is consumed by the crop. Here I wanted to highlight the different buckets for surface water, MID, TID, Belico-Cortez, riparian water, or other surface water that may occur. So we have the buckets ready. We're still working on the policies and mechanisms to bring that data into the tool. We can look at this for all water accounts, or you can look at this parcel by parcel. For folks who are into the data, you can extract this out and bring it into Excel for whatever analysis you want to provide on your own. And then scrolling down further, as we bring in the water supply components, you'll start to see that in this dashboard with the different tiers that Mike described and how your usage has risen up in the tiers through the irrigation system. This is all just placeholders right now as those policies are being refined over the summer and fall. The activity sheet that I'm working through today, we'll hand out copies of that after I'm done. So you all will have kind of a step-by-step instruction to go through these pieces. We'll also link a PDF for folks who are attending remotely who want to walk through this. I can click into I'll go to I can click into any of the parcels here. I'll see my APN and I can click through into a parcel detail page. On the left, I can also click the parcel overview and see a list of the parcels. For some of the water accounts, in a simpler case, you'll have 1 or 2 APNs. More complicated cases, you may have a dozen or more APNs and may prefer kind of a tabular view for the larger operations with dozens or more APNs in a single water account. I can click through into the detail page for each parcel. Now we're looking at from the parcel's perspective rather than the water account's perspective. Here we'll be able to see things like the irrigation status, the county, the owner record according to the tax assessors. We have the means to update the owner name and address if parcels are changing hands. You just need to work with the GSA to change any parcels that have sold or were otherwise need to be updated. And then the inventory of the fields from Land IQ. Land IQ provides an assessment of the crops that are they're determining to be grown on the particular fields. And then down here we have a measurement of a chart of the different water measurements that are occurring, the ones we just looked at in that tabular view. That's kind of the parcel perspective. Maybe the last thing, I'll go back to navigate back to the water account, and I'll just draw attention to if you're wanting to bring someone else into the platform to help you manage this, a family member, a business partner, a consultant, you can share your PIN with that person and they can create their own username and profile and get connected to it. You can also come in here and add users directly if you have the email address. You want to invite a family member to help you, just type in their email address. You can invite folks in a view-only mode or as the account holder. The difference is the account holder can add new users. The account holder can do that consolidation or changes to water accounts. Whereas if you bring folks in as a viewer, that would be they could see the data only, but couldn't change it. So you can feel free to share your PIN, or if you want to invite folks in to help you use the tool, but you don't want them to be able to change your pooling rules, just enter their email address and invite them as a viewer. So I think with that, we can move into the Q&A portion.
Will people online be able to hear me if I speak better?
I can repeat your question, or maybe it should come to the front.
So, officially, this is a meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee, and I neglected to mention that. So we don't have a quorum of the Technical Advisory Committee present, so, and if we did, it would just be informational purposes. But we do need to have the opportunity for folks to make public comments. So if anybody has any comments that they would like to make, we'd like to limit you to 3 minutes, and if you have any comments online, go ahead and type them into the chat box and we'll read them out loud. But is there any public comment? Or we'll have opportunity for Q&A later after this, and that'll happen either via the chat box online, which we'll monitor, or you just, raise your hand and we'll call on you. But are there any public comments that folks want to make? Given that this is a official public meeting? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the Q&A. So thank you for bearing with me.
And then for the Q&A, we can talk about the platform, the mechanics of what I just showed. I think that any questions on the policy and the background for the GSA are also.
Yeah, great. I'm just gonna jump us back to the PowerPoint real quick for that. Okay. Okay, Q&A. Yeah, go ahead.
You could bring up that example of the airport there. 3 fields, one parcel. Showed us what the ET was, the precipitation. It didn't look to me like there was any irrigation that had occurred, yet they were still being charged.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so oh, it's not sharing. What is it sharing?
Yeah, so if you could walk through
Oh.
what the different lines on the graph are, because it's set up kind of as a running account. And rainfall or effective precip is like a deposit in the account. And then when the total ET increases over the rainfall, that's when we'll start being charged.
Even if you're not irrigating?
If there's an issue with that, we would work it out on the field basis on a case-by-case basis, but that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, so I think important to note here, so the total ET is very close to the total effective precip. So what this is showing is that basically all of your ET is coming from precipitation that's fallen on this field, right? Until you start adding those other types of applied surface water. This is pretty de minimis on the 0.03. The other thing to note is that precip, stays in the soil. So it's not like exactly month to month, the precip that falls is what you use. So this kind of is a rolling effect for precip, but this is really showing you that essentially all of the ET is coming from precip. And because you haven't irrigated, right, just with the way that we calculate effective precip, it's not going to be one-to-one exactly every single time. But this is essentially saying we know you haven't irrigated and your ET is accounted for from your precip.
Okay, so typically there's deposits to the account in, November, December, January, whenever it rains.
Roll down that screen. Maybe also previous screen. Right there.
Here.
Consumed groundwater still at 0.03, but no groundwater.
Yeah, Tim.
I think the gentleman remember that the water period starts in November. We had an answer in half the rate of support. So when the week starts to grow the next month, they're in the water.
Yeah. Okay, I did, yeah. So Tim's point for folks online was that we did get a lot of rain and we got about an inch of rain in October. And so the reporting period starts in November. And when we're looking at these things, yes, it's showing you 0.03 right now, but you got to look at it for the whole year. So this is it's just saying that a little bit of that ET is not accounted for by precip right now. And that's just based on the way that we're calculating effective precip, right? We have a percentage that we use of the total precip that's standard for all fields and all parcels, right? But each parcel is going to have a little variability. So this is really just the result of having an average percentage that we're using for effective precip.
I think all that is a good question, because I
Yeah.
think it, you know, it raises something that we need to be looking at, so, but, yeah.
You're gonna have a base allocation, right? That is part of your irrigated land fee that you're gonna pay. And it's gonna be above all, you know, it's gonna take into account for all that, so you won't be charged for rainfall.
There was a question online about why we chose the reporting period of November through October instead of the kind of classic water year, October through November, or wait, September through October, whatever, October 1 through September, it's water year.
So we looked at three options. The first was to use the calendar year, the second was to use the water year, and the third was to use the year that's more in line with how people irrigate. And what we didn't want to do was split up a fee between two periods, right? But so that's why we started with November 1st, figuring that generally people are done irrigating by the end of October, and that they continue to irrigate through the next October. So that's how we decided to break them.
So fall rains, the weeds grow nice and green. The satellites detect that as a healthy crop.
The satellites detect that as a withdrawal from your soil moisture count, right? So precipitation always deposits to your soil moisture count, ET always withdraws. And then applied groundwater is the unknown that we're trying to calculate for. But, you know, I mean, think of your soil as being the account. So, yeah, yes, there is water withdrawals from that account anytime something uses that soil moisture.
Okay, the other question?
Is the ET figured by parcel or is it by region? Like, is it every 5 square miles or?
It's a good question. So the land IQ data, I believe, is 10 meters by 10 meters, which, oh my God, what is that in feet?
30 feet by 30.
30 feet by 30 feet.
Roughly, yeah, I'm not sure whether they're 30-meter pixels or 10-meter pixels. Sentinel is 10 meters, Landsat is 30 meters. But I think that they are calculated for each roughly 100 foot by 100 foot square. Matt, you,
Land IQ, I'm not sure. OpenEC is the 30 by 30.
okay, well, OpenET uses Sentinel.
Yeah, so the way that the ET works is over the field boundary, it takes the average of all of those 100 square foot pixels. So it's pretty close.
So if your neighbor doesn't spray the middles and you've got 3 foot of cover crop, that's his problem, right? I mean,
Yes,
Okay.
generally. And so part of the reason why we have the fields as opposed to the parcels is because sometimes parcel boundaries can be a little off and we don't want to credit your neighbor's ET to you. So the fields help mitigate that problem.
So how do you know precipitation by parcel?
Same way. So it's the precipitation for each field summed up to the parcel level.
So they're gonna charge you on what?
So the
Different rates.
fees would be based on consumed groundwater. So that would be the ET minus the effective precip minus any surface water.
You gotta pay the,
Yes.
You gotta-
and you have to make a cross.
Savannah, you might
Uh-huh.
mention how close the weather stations are, because there was a question back here about my rainfall is different from my neighbor.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Land IQ has put specific weather stations out across the entire subbasin, both in the East Turlock Subbasin GSA and in West Turlock Subbasin. And so I think they have like 5 or 8 different precip stations throughout our GSA. So it's pretty accurate in terms of having actual real on the ground local data for precip. Andy, was there something in the chat?
The question is, if it's required to register for the platform.
Oh, it's not required to register for the platform, but we would strongly encourage everybody to register because this is going to be where you can see in real time, or sorry, not real time, but this we're going to be able to see as data gets updated. the information that the GSA is looking at. So this is the,
So just that you're aware, we're gonna be able to see your parcel data in the platform regardless of whether you register. Registering for the platform will help us to have a conversation if there's something wrong, and will help you to manage your water allocation across the. What your floodplain.
it's good. So that would go under our other surface water bucket. And it's a pretty unique case. So I'd say talk to us and we can figure out how we can account for that because we want to make sure that you're getting credit for essentially recharging situation. There was a question online asking about allocation limits. And yes, Mike briefly touched on that, but that's going to be covered in another workshop later this summer, specifically talking about usage tiers and fees and what that's going to look like. Question? Mhm.
So this may be a dumb question. The past 5 to 8 years now, we've been getting pre-stacked to do cover crops and things like that to make sure that we cut down on erosion, cut down on all these different things. And to be 100% honest, most of the farmers in this building that I know of at least have dumped an ungodly amount of money into being better stewards of the earth. And so now what you're saying is because somebody's gonna fly over my field and see that I have a cover crop, I'm gonna get deducted. So now it's incentivizing me to spray solid, which is gonna put me right back into the same issue we had before. So are we chasing our tail or are we actually doing something beneficial?
That
So,
is, yeah.
I can speak to that a little bit. So cover cropping is a complicated question when it comes to water use, right? Because we know from the data that cover cropping can increase your soil moisture storage and can increase your recharge, the amount of water that doesn't run off but goes into the subsurface. So under our MLRP program, under our multi-benefit land repurposing program, we want to incentivize and promote those practices to the extent that they help with your water budget. Okay, so you know, all that to say, both programs are still under development right now. So I can't give you a specific answer how it's going to be addressed, but we are aware of the issue. And we want to promote cover cropping to the extent that it improves your soil moisture balance. And you know, we have some experts on tap that can help us with it. Now, does that mean everybody's going to be required to do cover cropping? Absolutely not. Your ag practices are your own. But to the extent that we identify something as a potential benefit, we're going to let you know about it, and we're going to provide you incentives that equate to financial incentives to implement those things.
Yeah, the other thing about cover crops is that what we typically see is your ET is a little bit higher in those spring months where you're not typically irrigating. And we have talked about it in our rules and regs committee about down the line, is there a way to, you know, provide credit, like Mike was saying, for cover crops? Because it really does, it increases your ability to hold moisture from precip and other sources in the soil profile. And so that like blanket percentage for effective precip, you know, might be a little bit different if you have cover crops.
So for example, we could choose to adjust the factor that we use for effective precipitation if you meet certain cover crop criteria.
Yeah, because I mean, cover crops at the end of the day are, I mean, I don't know anyone here that probably irrigates their cover crop. You know, they have a cover crop, they're only putting it out for precipitation. So that means all the water that you're holding for precipitation, so the reason why I put it there, and also for its own nutrient, it doesn't matter, blah, 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 you know, we get on tangent there, but I mean, it doesn't really make sense to put a cover crop out if, you know, you're irrigating it, but at the same time, if you're gonna get your water pulled away from you because of the cover crop, then it doesn't make sense to put a cover crop out there. So it's, that's where I guess, so it's sense, but we'll see.
I think what Mike's saying though is we recognize that and we want to build in thoughts for that. We don't know exactly what that buffer is at this point in time. There's a lot of studying being done. But we want to continue to encourage you to do cover crops, and we're going to figure out an adjustment that supports you doing cover crops.
So
Yeah.
you're not penalized.
Right, and who do you guys working with on that? You know, let me ask you.
We're working with Sustainable Conservation, with Alyssa De Vincentis. She's a PhD, that hydrologist, worked with Suscon on that issue. And so, and we'll pull in others as necessary. I know East Side, Sub-Basin and Salinas Valley has done some studies on cover cropping. So we're trying to avail ourselves of the best available information to figure out how can we do it in a way that decreases runoff and increases the net infiltration, even after accounting for ET. I mean, that's what we want to promote. And any other cover cropping uses, that's up, I mean, they're all up to the individual, but any other cover cropping uses beyond that is up to the individuals. If they want to do it in a way that increases their net EP, that's, you know, that's up to the individual. But there are ways to do it in a way that improves soil moisture retention and decreases runoff and increases.
Great, okay. I think we've got time for one more question before we need to move into the in-person activity. So let's.
Yeah, sorry.
My understanding, based on the legislation that's being written right now, is that we will be mandating pollinator habitat based off the Endangered Species Act. That's being set federally and state. So why is that not being implemented in the plan, knowing that it's going to be mandated for each farmer to be compliant to farm anything that has pollinators on it?
So we would love to talk with you as we develop our multi-benefit land repurposing program. Under that program, we have a topic of miscellaneous ag practices, including cover cropping, including hedgerows, including pollinator habitat, and doing that in a way that promotes sound or less groundwater use. So we'd be very interested in talking with you further about that, but that is something that's on our radar screen.
Okay, I think, did you have one last? Okay.
Kind of the flip side of the cover crop, planting young trees, the flyby, you know, they're healthy, but there's a small canopy, it's gonna know the difference, right?
Yeah, so Land IQ also has an estimate for permanent crops at the age of the crop, that they've backed out of things, but yeah, I mean, your usage, your ET on a baby almond field versus a full-grown almond field is gonna be significantly different.
Yeah, I looked at this yesterday, and I can show you, we have a curve, like, for example, for all fields that are designated as almonds, which we have, I think, over 1,000 fields designated as almonds, and what the ET calculated consumptive use is. And it ranges anywhere from close to 0 on up to about 3.3, 3.4 feet. And, the close to 0 just means that, yeah, folks have probably pulled out their trees. And, a foot or something, it probably means, okay, they're very young trees. So we account for that, with the EP calculator. Now, we can provide you more data. It actually looks pretty good, pretty believable. It lines up with other estimates that we have. I'm not saying ET is perfect. It has its own shortcomings and warts, but anybody who's interested in looking at it more closely, or if you have questions you don't completely understand how we're using it versus how we would use meter data if we had it, then we're happy to spend the time with you to show you what.
Okay, awesome. Just to keep us on schedule, I'm gonna go ahead and move us along here. So for folks online, we're gonna adjourn the webinar. What we'll do is we will post the activity sheet and the pumping guidelines, and this presentation will be available on the Turlock website along with the recording in the next couple of days. Our IT guy's on vacation actually, so we'll get those up as soon as he's back. And then thanks for joining us, and we'll go ahead and end the webinar and then transition into the in-person activity. So, okay, thanks everyone.